Okay, in this next lesson, we are going to look at the use of compressors in mixing. Now, a compressor does exactly what it says it does, and it compresses the sound. So people often think that compressors make things louder, but what it actually does is makes the loudest sound as soft as the softest sound, or as soft as you set it to be, but then brings the overall sound back up. So it's perceived to be louder because it's squashed so much, and the sound is brought back up. But it's not actually louder, so to speak. Well, that's not the main purpose of the functions, even though it can make things sound louder. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring a compressor, and I'm going to place it on the drum track. I want to put on our kick to start off with. So here's the compressor down the bottom. So let's explain what everything does. So this, one of the most important things, I guess, is the threshold. So this one here, this fader here with the arrow moving up and down, that's our threshold. And what this basically means is the point at which the compression is going to start to kick in. So if you leave it at the top and the sound doesn't move past the top, it's not going to kick in and it's not going to do anything. But if we move it down here and the meter goes past the threshold, I'll just demonstrate here. Okay, as you can see, the meter is passing this notch here, this little triangle here, and that means some compression is starting to occur. So how much is it compressed? Well, that all depends on the ratio. So we've got the ratio up here. So 2 to 1 basically means anything that passes past this notch here, past this arrow, anything above it is going to be half the amount of volume as it was originally. Okay, so if we make that up to 5, it's going to be 1/5. If I make that up to 9, it's going to be 1/9 of the original sound. So anything that passes past this threshold is going to be 1/9 of the sound now, according to the ratio. Now, what the attack and release do is basically when the sound passes this threshold, the attack says how quickly does the compression kick in. So you can make the compression kick in only like a few milliseconds after the sound or the volume passes the threshold. Or the same like the release, you can make it stop compressing once it passes back below by setting the release time. So this can be handy, especially with the attack. Say if you've got a drum sound and you want the initial hit of the drum to stay really prominent. You don't want to squash that, but you want everything after the initial hit to kind of be brought out and I guess sucked into the compressor so a sound sounds thicker. So we'll demonstrate this on the kick right now. So I'm going to do a high compression. Let's just go about 7 to 1. Now this is probably going to be overkill. But I'm going to bring this right down and I'm going to let you have a listen to the kick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it off as it plays and I want you to hear the difference. So let's play the kick. Okay, so I guess what sounds really weird about this is the initial hit is just as loud as the actual kick sound itself. So the beater hitting the drum is just as loud as the rest of like the overtones and all the fade out, or I guess the the trailing off of the sound is just as loud as the initial hit. So that's what we probably call overkill. But if we were to say set the ratio to 4 to 1, and we weren't going to be so aggressive with the threshold, we can probably fatten up our kick sound a little bit. Let's just have an experiment. So this output meter on the right-hand side is basically, once the compression starts, you'll see this gain reduction knob come down. So it kind of tells you how much gain the original volume is losing from the compression. And you can bring the output back up using this gain monitor here. The only thing is we've got this makeup thing enabled. And what that basically means is it automatically calculates the gain and kind of readjusts it for you. So you don't have to worry about this too much. But if the sound's too soft, you can actually boost that like I just did before. And make it a little bit louder with the end product. So let's have a listen to the original compressor and what it sounds like before and after. So that's compression on, off, so you can kind of hear the undertone, that under thump is a lot now more pronounced in the kick sound. So that's worked quite well with the compression. So we listen to the rest of the piece. Let's have a listen. Okay, the last thing to think about is the knee. So what a knee essentially means, I'm going to change the view here, and this might explain it a little bit better. So with the knee, if the knee is really sharp, it basically means that no compression will occur until the sound has gone past the threshold. Whereas if the knee is really soft, so if you boost up to 18 decibels and you can see a curved line, that basically means the compression will start to occur before the actual the threshold begins. So you see these lines coming in and out. I don't know if you zoom in on that or can have a look. That's basically saying the compression will start to occur. So that's just something to think about. So when you're doing vocals, you don't want it to be as sharp. You want the compression to kind of subtly kick in. So you use a softer knee for that. But whereas drums, you might, because it's such a punchy sound, you might want a harder knee, or you might just want to play around with this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through my track and I'm going to apply some compression to a few things. Then we're going to come back and I'm just going to walk you through what I applied compression to. Okay, I've gone through and I've applied compression to a few things within my track, and I'm just going to run you through what they are. So, opening up my drum group, we did the kicks just before we explained that. On the snares, I did a compression. I did some compression as well. I brought the threshold around quite low. I used a ratio of 4:1 and a very quick attack. And what this does is kind of sucks in the initial hit and takes the whole snare drum sound and kind of sucks it and makes it fill out. So we'll have a listen to it. We'll listen to it with and without the compression. So I'll just solo this one. And here it is with the compression. And here it is without the compression. I'll play it one more time with the compression. So it kind of just sucks like the overtones into the compressor and kind of makes the snare sound a little bit thicker, but probably a little bit softer at the same time, but that's okay because I want it to be more of a blast of noise, more so than a really prominent hit. I also added a compressor to the bass line. Now we've already got sidechain compression here, but it's the same function, but it uses the compressor a little bit differently. So it's the same process, the compressor, but it's using it a little bit differently. So what I've done is put a compressor with a 5:1 ratio, meaning once it passes the threshold here, the sound is 1/5 of the sound. A reasonably fast attack, and this kept the release as it was. And I've made the knee really soft, so 18 decibels there. And what this does is kind of when after the sidechain kicks in, it really just sucks the bass back out and really fills up the piece. So we'll just have a listen to both of those. So here it is with without the compressor. Sorry, I have to solo this. Here it is without the compressor. And here it is with the compressor. So you can kind of hear those offbeat hits that are a result of the sidechain are a lot thicker. Now, the probably most obvious one and the biggest one I've applied the compression to is the melody in my track. So I've just done it to the melody here. And what I've done is just a 4:1 ratio. The compression's down about I don't know, 2/3 of the way, half the way down, and a reasonably slow attack. But what this does is actually sucks in the reverb of the sound that's coming out of Massive and kind of makes it sound a lot bigger, and it fills the room. Or if it was in a room like a club or something like that, it'd fill the room right up with this sound. So I'll solo it, and we'll have a listen to it without the compressor first, and then we'll listen to it with the compressor. So you can hear the reverb from the original sound getting sucked in to the compressor. So when I play this with the whole track, it really fills out the track, fills out the melody within that part. So that's compression in a nutshell, basically just squashing sounds to make them sound fatter, to make them sound thicker, and also to level out the dynamic ranges in sounds. Basically, you can use them in whatever you want. I've only used them on 3 things here, but if I was to go through and professionally mix one of my tracks, I'd probably use them on almost all of my tracks. But you don't want to over-compress as well. So when things start to sound too sucked in, sound too fake, and sounds like there's absolutely no dynamics within a piece, it can sound over-compressed as well, and you don't really want that. So you kind of have to use it with discretion. So basically, anything that you think that needs a little bit of fattening up, or the dynamics need leveling out, apply a compressor to them. Have a go. But yeah, don't over-compress is the main message I think here. Just kind of use it to gently squeeze a track and thicken it up just a little bit. Okay, before this video ends, I'll just give you an example of over-compression. So I'll just grab the melody that I've got the compressor on already, and what I'm going to do is just crank the ratio right up, something really high, around 25. There we go. And I'm going to bring the threshold down. So that means it's going to be anything that passes the threshold is only going to be 1/25th, and it's going to squash the track right down. So let's have a listen to how it sounds from there. So that's an example of something that's over compressed. So basically there's no dynamics in it anymore. It just kind of sounds like one big wash of noise. And yeah, the softest sounds are as loud as the loudest sounds and vice versa. And it's just a bit of a mess. If I play it with a track, let's have a listen to it. And yeah, it kind of gets lost in there. So that's an example of overcompression. So you just want to avoid that by cranking the ratio too high and cranking or taking the threshold down too low. Basically, you don't want a ratio of more than, the highest I'd probably go on anything is probably about 9:1 or 10:1. So if you stick to around the 4 to 5 mark and kind of slowly decrease the threshold. So I'll just give you an example. So, 4:1 and slowly bring the threshold down until it starts to suck in and you can kind of feel it or hear it starting to sound a bit thicker. That's the best way to go, especially when you're still learning how to use something like that, because you just don't want to crank everything and it becomes over compressed. So yeah, just think about that when you're compressing and try not to over compress. All right, so yeah, go through and apply some compression to your track, and yeah, let's see how it sounds after you've done that.